Hello, I'm Will Pryor, a national master of chess from the United States of America, and I'd like to show you today my method of checkmating with the two bishops. Now, first of all, I'd like to start by asking you how many diagonals there are on a chessboard. Most chess players know how many ranks and files there are, 8 by 8. But how many know off the top of their head how many diagonals there are? Well, here they are. Let's count them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the long diagonal. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 diagonals. Normally the corner squares aren't counted as diagonals. And that people refer to the diagonals by their starting and stopping squares. For example, this one would be h7 to g8. h7 to g8 diagonal. This one would be the h6 to f8 diagonal, and so on. We're not going to be doing a lot of that here. Now, I think it'd be easier to just say this is diagonal. Really, I would start here with the corner square and say this is diagonal 1, 2, 3, and so on like that. But I think that would be easier, and that's be easier for people to remember how many diagonals there are if they numbered them in that fashion. Diagonal 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But they're not done that way. They're not named that way, so I think that's why a lot of people don't know how many diagonals there are. It doesn't really hurt your game, but it's nice to know. Alright, now how does this help us? What we want to do is concentrate on the diagonals. It's easy to concentrate on the rank and files. This is why the two rook checkmate is so much easier than the two bishop checkmate for a lot of people. Because it's easier for them to visualize the board in the standard fashion, such as it is here, and you know where you're going to be driving the black king. Over here to the edge of the board. That seems pretty obvious. These two rooks are taking away the two files, one that the king is on and one that the king can't go to, so it's going to have to go over this way, and bit by bit you can see that the king is herded over into the edge of the board where it's checkmated. Alright, very good. So, my idea, my method, and I've never seen anybody else do it this way, is to do the same type of thing on this board. We'll use the diagonals to herd the king not over to the edge of the board first. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's like trying to put a square peg into a round hole, the way I'm looking at it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think it's a lot easier if you go directly over into the corner. Now let's. This is what let me show you what I do sometimes when I'm practicing this endgame with a real board. Now I like to orient it in this direction. Now don't try this at home. Remember, I'm a national master and I'm fully aware of the hazards involved when you turn a real board in this direction. But what it also does is give you a better view of the board. This board now, all of a sudden, it doesn't look like a board of ranks and files. It looks like a board of diagonals. And that's what we're interested in. It's got a whole bunch of diagonals on it now. There's no ranks and files that can be easily viewed from this angle. So you've got all your diagonals. 1, 2, 3, blah, 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 all the way up to the end. And in this method, what we're going to do is drive that king into one of these corners right off the bat. This one looks like an obvious candidate right over here. King is pretty well over there anyway, and that's the one we're going to be looking at, and we're going to be driving it that way into this corner. That's going to be our method and the way that it's going to be done. And remember, when you're dealing with that chessboard, a real chessboard, don't do that at home without the proper equipment. All right. Now, how often does this checkmate show up? Now, I have had, well, probably about 1,000 tournament games. And how many times do you think this thing has come up? Well, it's never come up, as a matter of fact. I've never had this in a tournament game. Out of about 1,000. I did have the bishop and knight checkmate one time, but this particular checkmate I've never had. In fact, I've never had any other checkmate. Bishop, rook, just plain rook against the king, queen against the king. It just doesn't happen that often. I guess people give up, before it actually happens. But it could happen, and certainly in blitz I've had it. And with this method, you got an actual chance to be able to pull off this checkmate with just within half a minute once you get good at it. So let me show you how it's going to start out. Again, I recall our goal, and that is to herd this king over into this corner. That's our goal. That's what we're going to be doing. And we're going to use the two bishops to do that. So we're going to line up our bishops in a way that they're going to cooperate to do that. Now, here they are. They're lined up on the adjacent diagonals. These are called Horwitz bishops, based on a 19th century chess player and writer. And the main thing about this is that the bishops cooperate when they're side by side on the diagonals like this to create a barrier, just as very much the rooks did when they were on the files. So this king, the black king, can never cross this barrier, and you can see he's stuck right now already into this little triangle here. So it's pretty obvious the place to checkmate this king is over here. Now, why should we first drive it over into this edge of the board and then figure out which corner we're gonna put it in? No, we're gonna go right now. We already know it's going over here into this corner. That's the way it's going to be done. So let's keep going. And bishops sometimes are able to fend for themselves. This king is not going to be able to approach the bishops to attack them and force them to move back because they're protecting all the squares that the black king could use to attack them. It's just not possible. These bishops can ward off the king ward off the black king all by themselves, and eventually this king the white king is gonna have to participate. So it's gonna gradually be moving its way up the board to help deliver the checkmate into the corner. And the black king is backing off, so we're going to go forward with our king. He's just kind of marking time here. And we're going to go ahead and take off one more diagonal away from the king. By making this move, that's taking off one more diagonal. We're getting closer and closer for this black king. He's getting confined bit by bit into a smaller and smaller triangle. Almost till he's going to wind up right here in the corner. Alright, black's king attacking our bishop. We're going to have to back off for a minute. He backs off. We get forward with our king. He's going backwards. And again, we have cut this king off into a little triangle, you can see. He's not going to get out of that little barrier. And you can see where his final resting place is going to be. Meanwhile, we're bringing up our king until he does something, like attack our bishop. We're going to have to back it off. And here comes our king again. And bit by bit, we're going to be taking away squares. Again, the improvement of the diagonal. We're advancing one more. And bit by bit, the procedure just follows itself until we get to this point. And this is the final diagonal. That's all we're going to need from our bishops. They don't have to get any closer. They've reached this diagonal, the 3 squared diagonal, and the 4 squared diagonal. That's enough. That's going to be as far as the bishops have to progress. Now, the next phase is going to be to get this king either to this square, g6, or f7, if we're intending to mate in this corner on h8. That's our goal. So, the king is going to want to get to one of those 2 squares. Why? Because that square, an easier way to remember it is it's a knight's distance away from the corner square. Why? I don't know why. Actually, why is that? Well, it just works out that way. It's the formation that delivers the checkmate without interfering with the bishops. So we're going to see how that's done. Now he's attacking our bishop. We're going to have to move it or protect it, which we do here. Again, the bishops are on their final diagonals. The king is in only a 3 square triangle now. These are only the only 3 squares it's allowed to move to, and we're going to take away one of those squares at least before we finally deliver a checkmate. Now we could step up here with the king, because that is the final spot we want to put the king to, but it kind of interferes with this bishop here working along that diagonal. So we're not going to do it that way, although you could. What we're going to do is move the bishop out of the way first. So these bishops remain clear. Just the bishops are just looking at air and not their own king. And our king is just going to wait for the right time, the right moment. It couldn't go to g6 there because the black king is controlling that square. So we're just going to have to wait a move. The black king's going to have to back off. It can only go to h8 or g8. It's the only squares it can go to. And when it does, we're going to move right in now to our final spot for the king. So now the bishops have reached their final spot. They're on their correct diagonals. The king's reached its final spot. It's a knight's distance away from the corner square where we intend to checkmate the black king. So it's not going to be very long at all. Now it's time to start checking the black king. And it's going to be checkmate in 2 moves. Check, checkmate. That's it. That's how we're going to get the black king stuck in a corner with this very simplistic but uncommon method. Now black could have made it a little bit more difficult for us earlier. Instead of moving his king over to e7, he could have moved it to e6 because he's anticipating our plan. We want to improve these bishops' diagonals one by one. So what we're looking to do is move on over to f5, and the black king is going to anticipate that. He knows our method now, and he's going to try to slow us up a little bit. But that's okay. We'll just move the king up until we get a chance. And he's going to have to move back somewhere. Let's say he goes here. And now again, it's a mistake now to, even though we can go to this square without our bishop getting picked off, it's a mistake to do so. Because what's going to happen is the black king is going to slide out over here. And this is going to allow the black king to escape the barrier. Notice he's on the wrong side of the barrier now. We want to put the king into this corner, and now we've shut the black king out on the wrong side of the barrier, which means we're either going to have to mate it in the a8 corner or A1 corner, which we don't want to do. We've already set up our mind that we're going to checkmate it in the H8 corner, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're not going to play bishop to F5 now. We're going to bring up the king, let it do a little bit of work, and you can see now we're prepared to move that bishop closer, because the king is taking away a key square where the king was about to escape. So we're able to advance the bishops slowly but surely anyway, even though if black is stubborn and tries to take away the key diagonals that we're going to need, it's not going to work out in the long run. Eventually it's going to work out. You can see here again the king has already taken away the flight square that would get it on the wrong side of the barrier. We're not going to let that happen, and we're just going to move the king in close enough where we're going to be able again to advance the bishop onto the next diagonal in the sequence. And there we go. The bishops have reached their final diagonals, their optimal diagonals for the checkmate. It just remains for us to get our king in. We're going to put it on F7 this time. The king's just going to go have to go back and forth for a little bit. Now be careful here. Notice the black king only has one square, legal square it can move to. Now if we were to make a move like this, again jumping in too soon, we've taken away all of the squares that the black king can move to, and that's a stalemate. That's a draw. That would be a terrible thing to happen after you've worked so hard to drive the king into this corner, only to make one hasty move and give up half a point. So we have to be a little bit careful, and instead of moving that king in, we're going to wait, make a waiting move with the bishop. And again, the king's only got one move, and we're going to back it off with the bishop, give it one more move. And now it's time to move the king in, where the king has got black king's got a move to go to. And now, since everybody's in their proper place, that means it's only two more moves to checkmate, and it's time to start checking. Check, and that's a checkmate. We've done it again. Okay, so this method, as far as I know, no one else has come up with this method. If you find out that somebody else has done, this method before, don't tell me, because I want to think that I'm the only one that's really has done this before, and I thought of it myself. But will this method always work if you have two bishops? No, it won't. If the bishops are of the same color, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to checkmate the king. In fact, you can have as many bishops as you want. If we're all on the same color squares, let's say the dark squares, they're all on the dark squares, you can have as many bishops as you like, and you're not going to be able to checkmate the king without having at least one light squared bishops. Now, you could force a stalemate, but there's no way you're going to be able to force a checkmate no matter how many bishops you have if they're all in the same color. And the reason for that is there's no way, if the king stays on the light squares, that you can check the king. There's no bishop that could check the king if the king's on a light square, and the king certainly can't check another king. He can't move in to check itself. So you can see it's just, it could never happen that you could get a checkmate no matter how many bishops of all the same color they're going to be on the board. Okay, so that wraps it up for me. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.